Slow Burn Media and Bill Huffman present Who Killed, a podcast that provides a voice for the voiceless.
If I was a detective, I would be looking through my old cases for sure.
In December, 10 TV aired an update on the death of 15-year-old Lori Nesson. That night, a viewer called police with information that helped close the 46-year-old case. And Wednesday, Crime Tracker 10's Angela Ann revealed that information helped investigators ultimately solve the case.
Well, tonight, Crime Tracker 10's Lacey Crisp continues our coverage as she explains how crime analysts put the pieces together.
Investigators solved one of the oldest cold cases in central Ohio after Crime Tracker 10's Angela Ann spoke with Lori Nesson's family and investigators back in December. So when you got that initial match, Lori's face, what went through your mind?
It was just incredible. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
But investigators had a similar case in the area, and through DNA samples matched Nesson's case to 17-year-old Karen Adams' case.
That's when I looked at that other case that police had told me about and pulled up those main samples that we had and was shocked.
2 decades-old cases solved with an relevant 10 TV viewer in the advancement in DNA testing. Suspect Robert Meyer and Charles Weber were already convicted felons who've now passed away.
Considering the level of crime that occurred, I definitely think it's possible that these two individuals committed other crimes.
Investigators are asking other departments in the area to take a look at similar cold cases from that time. Solving cases, no matter how old, is why Deputy Herdeman says she works so hard on finding any clue to close the case.
For me, it's like that feeling of to have closure and be able to start the healing process is just kept me present.
In London, Lacey Crisp, TV News.
You can see our complete coverage of how this case came together on our website. Just go to tintv.com/crimetracker10.
Hello and welcome to episode 125 of Who Killed. I'm your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media production. I am very lucky to be joined again this week. He's been missed on the show, and that is one Nick, the host of the one and only True Crime Garage podcast. Welcome back to the show, Nick. It is very nice to have you.
Thank you for having me back here, Bill. I've been begging to come on, and you said no. I'm too busy, and I got too much going on. And look, I've been listening to the show, and so no, I'm joking. But I'm very happy to be on anytime to chat with my good friend Bill.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I've been focused these past few weeks on DNA cases and cold cases that kind of, they kind of reach a realm once they cross that 40-year period or even 30-year period where you're really grasping at straws. And I think I covered a case from 1953, and then I covered a case from 1972. And the case that we're going to talk about today is there are actually a couple cases within the topic that we're talking about today. And that is the case of Lori Nesson. And she was actually killed back in 1974. And she was a student at Columbus's Eastmore High School. And I know that you being from Columbus, I'm assuming that you were aware of this case. And when this DNA evidence came out just recently, it's something that probably hit close to home to you. What are your thoughts about the Lori Nesson case and the breakthrough that just happened?
Well, truth be told, Bill, I was unaware of this case until they made the DNA connection, until that information came out, and obviously completely excited that they made this connection and that we finally have this case being closed out in the proper manner. Eastmore High School, just to give a little background here, is on the east side of Columbus proper, and it would have been a fairly large school even in the 70s. And this would have been a well-populated area. the thing that really caught my eye when this came out and they connected two individuals saying, hey, these are the perpetrators of having killed this young woman.
Mm-hmm.
um, I thought, wow, this is incredible, because there were a lot of cases that were already on my radar, unsolved cases from the early 70s, late 70s, and early 80s, that I thought, well, if these two maniacs are out there doing this sort of thing, and we'll get into the sort of thing that they were doing, it sounded familiar to me in regards to some of those other cases. So I was completely intrigued by the breakthrough that they made in this case. And I'm sure, knowing the Franklin County Sheriff's Department and Columbus PD, how thorough that they've been, and how invested they've been, specifically Columbus PD, in cold cases as of the past 5 years, that I'm sure they looked at these two guys in other cases as well.
Yeah, and the two guys that we're talking about are Charles Weber and Robert Meyer. And these guys, I mean, you want to talk about some of the worst of the worst. I mean, you talk about people and recidivism and, being in and out of the system. I mean, these guys from 1963 basically were terrorizing women in Ohio. And it's shocking that it took so long for them to actually, get connected to these other crimes. But kudos to the attorney general and the detectives who basically ran the DNA again. And another thing that's so interesting about this case, the Lori's case, is that it was actually spawned from a tipster. And you know about this tipster, and that was you said she was she a cousin of Karen Adams?
Correct. So Karen Adams lived in that same area of the east side of Columbus. So you have the east side of Columbus, and then that kind of carries out to Whitehall. And if you continue on east, you go to Reynoldsburg and then the Blacklick area. And so all of both of these crimes with this Lori Neeson and Karen Adams, everything involved in their abduction, murder, and then where the bodies were eventually found are going to involve that far east side of Columbus, and then expand outward from there, continuing east. So it's all that same general area, and we're also talking about the same time frame, right? Within about a year or so of one another.
Within 6 months, actually.
6 months, yes. And so what we have here is Karen Adams' cousin. 10 TV, which is the local news here in Columbus, and probably not probably, it is the biggest news outlet here in Columbus. They own not just the channel 10 TV, but they own the Columbus Dispatch, as well as several radio stations here. So
I did not realize that, actually.
Yeah, that's the big boy here in Columbus. And they ran a story on this case, and I believe that when something big or a big story hits 10 TV news, it's going to hit those other outlets too. You know how having worked in the news yourself, you know how this works. There's that trickle down. And so it aired on 10 TV news, but I believe the cousin was specifically referencing an article that she had read saying, hey, this unsolved murder, this Lori Neeson unsolved murder, has so many similarities to my cousin's murder, which was solved. And it sounds like that one wasn't solved quickly either.
No, in all reality, that case, again, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, once cases reach that 30-40 year point, you're really lucky. I mean, to say the least, is if you find a perpetrator. And it was 37 years that it went unsolved. So it wasn't like it was happening.
Yeah. So this was interesting because we had several law enforcement agencies that are going to have to work this thing now, because we have Reynoldsburg police that are going to get involved. And now they're going to be needing to reach out to Franklin County Sheriff's Department, because Franklin County Sheriff's Department is the one that had the previous case.
Yes.
And so Detective Clark, somebody that I've spoke with multiple times on local cases here, who is a fantastic detective. He's been a detective for many years, a couple decades now, and he's worked several different burglary. I think he was in the burglary division for a while, and also worked robbery and homicide. And I'm not sure what division he is in now. I don't believe he's a cold case detective, but he's a very good detective, and he offered his assistance to Reynoldsburg in offering up what information they had in the solved case, so that they can compare notes and see if, in fact, if this cousin was right. Are there similarities? And both detectives that looked at this from Reynoldsburg and Franklin County both agreed there's so many similarities here that uh, we have to invest some further resources into seeing if the same two perpetrators killed that killed Karen Adams killed Lori Neeson.
Yeah. And then it basically took the cops to basically send in the DNA that they were able to get from her underwear, and they eventually were able to match it to Meyer. And of course Meyer's initial reaction was, he denied it. I don't know how my DNA would have gotten there. But
Right.
you know how things go. He's a liar and a killer and a kidnapper and pretty much an awful human being. And
Yeah, these guys were rapists
ugh,
and abductors and killers, and they probably did this more times than they've been caught. And what's bizarre here is they've been caught a lot for this kind of activity. And thank God that they have both spent the majority of their adult lives behind bars, because if not, this is something that they would have killed dozens and dozens of women had
I'm
they not been locked up for so much.
I'm not surprised. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're not connected to other killings. I mean,
They absolutely are, in my opinion, Bill. I think you're spot on with that. I don't know what I would put that number at, but
it's just they
to
don't have the DNA or for those cases. And yeah, you
well,
can't
now
put a
they
number.
do,
Well, but
right?
they don't necessarily have the DNA from that particular victim, is what I'm trying to
Correct.
say. I mean, they have their DNA, obviously, but when it comes to cases, I mean, again, like I talked about Naperville last week and Julianne Hanson, and there were so many stabbings and murders in Chicago. And I mean, I guess the 70s were kind of like the heyday of serial killers, I guess, if you want to call it that, because there really wasn't any communication between different authorities and different jurisdictions. I mean, somebody could commit a murder in one town and go live in another, and they wouldn't be able to connect the dots because they just didn't have any DNA technology or any way to, other than like say fingerprints and stuff like that. And anybody who was committing crimes was probably going to be wearing gloves. But like these guys sound like prowlers, and just
Hmm.
like we had talked, I think, off the record about how this sounds like almost like a weekend activity. I think you referenced that. And again, if you get convicted for something like this within 6 months, I mean, I know they were convicted decades after the crimes actually were committed, but if they committed those two crimes, as those heinous crimes, murders, kidnappings of two young women, uh, raping and assaulting them as well, and it's like, well, what else did they do? Because that's just 6 months. I mean, I know that the one guy spent 34 years of his life in jail, but what were you doing when you weren't outside of jail? Because it certainly sounds
This is
like,
what they were doing.
yeah.
Um, Look, and I think in a lot of jurisdictions, and I don't have the proper terminology in front of me, but I think that cohorting with convicted felons is
A felony amongst itself.
well, and it's also a violation, a
Yeah,
probation
or
violation
that's
or a
kind of what
parole
I meant. Yeah,
violation.
that's what I meant.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. Look, and I why are you mentioning then? Why are you mentioning this, Nick? Is because these two guys met when they were locked up.
I was just gonna go there too. 1963, they meet in prison. I mean,
One of them was already locked up for murder.
yeah. I mean, hey,
I think he killed somebody with a hammer.
you know,
And I couldn't find what the other guy was locked up for.
I would just take a wild guess and say it was something along the lines of assault, and
Murder
rape,
or
or kidnapping.
attempted murder. Yeah, I would bet attempted murder would be my first guess.
Sure.
So what we have here, Bill, is a situation that we've seen before, where we have people of like-mindedness finding one another in the worst place that you could find like-minded people,
Yeah.
and that would be in prison.
Yep.
People serving long sentences. Unfortunately, these sentences weren't long enough, and there was a lot of overcrowding in prisons in the 70s, and unfortunately that made a lot of states let people out a little earlier than they wanted to and that they should have. Ohio's been guilty of that, and several other states have been guilty of that. The worst that we saw was probably in Texas during the 70s. But with this case, these two maniacs, these two monsters, they're homicidal monsters is what they are. And
Back up a second. I want to wait. You can't throw that Texas thing out there. What are you referring to?
Texas let out the broomstick killer,
Okay.
who had viciously raped and murdered and kidnapped women, and they let him out because the overcrowding was so bad in Texas back then that they started letting out the nonviolent offenders. Okay, well, once they let them all out, the prison population, it was still overpopulated. They had to start letting out the violent offenders, so much so that they let out people that had been convicted of murder, and not just murders, heinous murders. And so they let out McDuff, the who went on to be called the broomstick killer, and he killed several women after they let him out. And that's all this guy was ever going to do, he was going to spend his time doing drugs and abducting and raping and killing women. And he did that successfully after they let him out. And he is a large reason, a big part of the reason why now in Texas, we think of Texas as, the state that does not take no shit from nobody, right? Take no prisoners, take no shit. And if you kill here in our state, not only will we execute you, but we will put you on a fast track that other states won't put you on. Well, the reason why they have that fast track to execution is the lessons they learned, the sad truth of what it became for them back in the 70s, when they were forced to, well, I don't know if forced is the right word, but when they felt that they were forced to let people like McDuff out of prison.
The reason why I brought that up is because I personally didn't know much about that particular aspect of Texas in the 70s, and I was not familiar with the broomstick killer, so I just wanted to basically hear what you were referring to and at least let the listeners know what you were referring to there, because I think that that also falls in line with what also was going on in the 70s, and that was the release of all the insane asylums. We can't forget about that. I mean,
correct.
When they were not allowed to commit people against their will, all the asylums where people of, the bad people with bad thoughts spent a lot of time. And when they were basically just let go, and you wonder why, like, the homeless population spiked and murders spiked. And the 70s were a crime-ridden era. These guys, Robert Meyer and Charles Weber, fit right in with the bad dudes of the 70s. And just picture them walking around in the pen talking about, man, we get out of here, we're gonna go. That they're probably just scheming the whole time they're in jail about, they have similar interests. Hey, we both like to rape and kill women. That's not good to have them together. I get that, like, I know that they try to make an effort to not, I don't know if they make an effort to try to keep these people, these like-minded individuals apart, but especially in the 70s, they weren't. I know that. I mean,
Well, you can't when you're confining them in the same four walls. I mean, it's impossible. Number one, and not to allow Kenneth McDuff the Broomstick Killer to take over this show or take over this topic, but he was, I cited him, but he was actually released and paroled in the 80s, in the late 80s. But that was it was a problem that didn't start the month before, the year before. It was a problem that started well before they were forced to let out somebody like Kenneth McDuff. But he was convicted. He killed two people. That he was originally, three people. He was originally sentenced to die, 3 death sentences that were commuted to life imprisonment, and then they paroled him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Total makes sense.
And so that tells you the state of affairs in the prison system down in the state of Texas. And keep in mind that each state runs their own prison system. And so that was the problem that was going on then. He was, for people that listen to True Crime Garage, they might be familiar with Kenneth McDuff, not because we've not covered him specifically, but he was and remains in a lot of people's minds to this day a possible suspect in the yogurt shop case.
And everybody,
because he was out and in that general area during the time. And not only that, he said to some people, like he liked to play games with the cops. And he said when they asked him about yogurt shop, he was always very weird about it. And then later in life, he said, I think he even told some people he did it, but I don't think he did. Number one. And number two, he said some other things like, almost like belittling the crimes of yogurt shop. Like had he done it, they would have, as bad as that whole thing was, Bill, it would have been, he's saying had he done it, it would have been a worse crime. Go ahead.
Well, because with the yogurt shop murder case, I mean, none of the women were sexually assaulted except for one, right? Or was,
I don't want to get into the specifics of yogurt shop because, that's a whole.
I know. I did like a 3-parter on it.
At least one of the female victims. There were 4 female victims, and at least one of them was sexual.
Because you would think, but I feel like with the yogurt shop case, unless Kenneth McDuff was with another dude, I mean, I think those 2 guys at the end of the night were the ones that committed the crime. And people who probably have no idea what I'm talking about can go back and listen to your episodes on the yogurt shop murders and Stitcher app, or my episodes on the yogurt shop murders, or who killed the girls. Those girls are.
Yeah. So the thing that connects him to yogurt shop is there was an abduction and torture and murder of a woman that was abducted not terribly far from the yogurt shop. Within a year or so of the yogurt shop case, and McDuff committed that crime with somebody else, with an accomplice. So, yeah. So, dude, I'm telling you, when you look at him and you look at yogurt shop, there's a lot of reasons to think that he could have done it. I said on True Crime Garage that his MO was to find a female victim and take them somewhere. And he did that almost every single time. And so my thought has always been with McDuff, his number one goal would have been to take the victim somewhere, because what he was interested in was the torture portion of his crimes more so than anything else. All those other crimes only came about because he wanted to sexually assault and torture women at the same time. And so he would have removed all 4 victims from the yogurt shop and taken them with him somewhere. And that didn't happen. And that doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that McDuff didn't do it. It's just my dumb garage opinion. Now, back to our case, though, what is interesting to me is 2 like-minded individuals who meet in prison. It's not a rare thing, right? It's not a rare thing. We know that the In Cold Blood, the Clutter family, they were killed from two guys that met in prison. Now, they were killed for different reasons than what Meyer and Weber were out doing, but Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris out in California, they killed 5 people in 1979.
Otis Toole and whatever the other dude's name was. Who was his partner in crime? Otis Toole's partner in crime.
Lee Lucas.
Yeah, Henry Lee Lucas. Yeah, I mean,
did they meet in prison?
Yeah,
because I know
you would think. I mean,
yeah. Well,
I mean, how else would these two individuals meet? I mean, they weren't like gregarious, social-minded individuals. The only place they could meet would be in prison, because that's the only place.
We know Bittaker and Norris met in prison. They killed 5 women together in 1979. They met when in lockup in San Luis Obispo. That's always a weird name for me to say.
Yeah.
And then we have, this is a lesser known one, but I'm only citing a couple here. This is a lot more common than I think people are aware of, but Stephen Dean Gordon and Frank Cano, they killed 5 people in Santa Ana and Anaheim, California in 2013 and 2014. They were both wearing ankle monitors when they killed these 5 people. They met under similar circumstances. And what you have here, Bill, is people that get together. Unfortunately, what people like Meyer and Weber have in common, and they might not really fully understand who they are, but my understanding and my belief with these types of monsters are that, number one, above and beyond, often what we see in these cases is you get 2 guys that are locked up for rape or sexual assault. And then they start talking with each other, and they both have the same understanding of their crimes. Well, I was only convicted. I only got caught because pardon my French, I'm going to talk like I'm one of these guys, but I only got caught because that bitch, she went to the cops. She was able to ID me. She was able to tell them what kind of car I was driving or give them some kind of evidence against me. And they start to develop this idea that, you know what, if I would have killed her, she wouldn't have been around to tell anybody. She wouldn't have been able to tell anybody that I was driving a blue van or a green pickup truck or a white Buick. She wouldn't have been around to tell them that I was 6'2", wearing a cowboy hat and blue jeans. She wouldn't have been around to tell them that I grabbed her out of the parking lot of the bar down the street. And the wheels start to turn, and they start to go, you know what? When I get out, after I get out from serving 8, 10, 15 years, whatever it is for what I was put in for, I ain't leaving. I'm never going to stop. You're not going to get me to stop sexually assaulting and raping women. I'm not stopping that. I'm just going to change my game. And I'm not going to leave that bitch alive to tell them anything about me. And they'll never catch me. And the reason why these guys do it, and it's so easy for them to make the switch from rape to murder, is because they're raping because they hate women.
Right.
They want to destroy women anyway. So it's not that big of a leap for them to go, all right, I've been doing this, and now I'm going to go to graduate to murder, because they were so close to doing it before. Now they have some other a-hole here that's cheering them on. This is not only that, I'll help you. And so these guys, Meyer and Weber, basically what they're doing, look, do I have hobbies? Yes. Bill, you got some hobbies?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that our hobbies are pretty regular, white bread, vanilla hobbies, right? I like to watch football. I like to go out with my buddies and play cards, throw darts.
Wait. You're forgetting about the times that we like to go drive around and I shouldn't talk about that. Sorry.
Right. These guys, their hobby isn't hunting or fishing or redoing old cars. It's, hey, let's go out, have some drinks, and then we'll drive around in my van or my pickup truck or my car or whatever.
It's gotta be a van.
Well, but for what they want to do, a van offers a different kind of mobile structure than what a vehicle does, than a car does, right? Their number one goal Weber and Meyer is the rape portion. Just like we talked about McDuff, his fascination was with the torture portion of his crime. All those other crimes were necessary because he wanted to torture a woman. Weber and Meyer, all of their other crimes are necessary for them to commit because they want to rape a woman. And you said something earlier about you were a little surprised that these weren't solved. Frankly, I'm not surprised that it took so long to solve them, because 95%, maybe probably more, it's in the high percentile of the murders and homicides that happen in this country is because somebody is mad at somebody else. And these are people that know one another. Bill did something to me. You know what? I'm going to get revenge on him. And maybe my assault's I'm going to lose it. It's going to turn into murder. Maybe I didn't intend to murder Bill, but it ended up being that way. What have you. But the 90-some% of the murders and homicides in this country are a result of one person being angry at another individual for something. And so when you have these two convicted felons who are already, I mean, they're violent, murderous, raping individuals. They're driving around drunk, probably still drinking in whatever vehicle. And I'm not trying to sell a Ban the Van t-shirt. I own a van myself. All right.
Do you?
Yes, I do own a van. But
I don't know if you should be talking about that, Nick.
what I'm pointing out, again, a van offers a different type of structure. It offers a different type of space for these guys to do what it is that they want to do. And unfortunately for the victims, these are just completely crimes of opportunity. These guys are unorganized serial sex offenders is what they are.
Let's hear from this week's sponsor, Best Fiends. It's really great to be getting back to normal this summer. I know I'll be heading to the movies and hitting the beach. And while at the beach, I may give my brain a refreshment by opening Best Fiends on my phone. True crime calls for a beach break now and then, and that's when I turn to Best Fiends. Solving puzzles is kind of my thing, and Best Fiends offers me a new challenge every day. It's way more fun than the other matching puzzle games out there. It's also one of those games that makes 30 minutes feel like 30 seconds. And guess what? It's totally free to download. One of the coolest parts about Best Fiends is whenever I open the game, there's something new going on every time. Whether it's a new challenge, new levels, or a fun monthly event. And I am really flying through these levels, which is an example that pretty much anybody can play. I find that moving through these puzzles and these different levels is a great experience. And it really does refresh my brain. Collecting all those different characters is just another reason that I turn to Best Fiends for a challenge. So if you're tired of the same old puzzle games, I believe this game is for you. And I actually have a favorite character, and he's aptly named Temper, because he fits my personality. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on this game. So join me and millions of people who are already playing this fun puzzle game. Download Best Fiends for free on the Apple App Store or Google Play today. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. All right, we are back.
And what an unorganized individual will do is they're not really worried about hiding their identity because there's no reason for them to do so. One, they don't know the victim. Whoever's going to end up being their victim, they don't know who that is. And I'm willing to bet that these guys not only have more victims, I wouldn't put the number so high, but my other guess would be that, and I don't have to guess this. I would be willing to bet the farm and that van that I just mentioned that these guys went out and did this many nights.
Yeah.
Probably once or twice a week. And this was typical behavior for them. And why did they kill on night A and not kill on night B? Just sadly, in this situation, it's probably just because they didn't see anybody on night B.
Yeah, it's like you do these things, you go out, it's not like when we're talking about hobbies and we're saying that these guys enjoyed prowling and stuff like that. Like you said, okay, they go out 3 or 4 nights a week. We're not saying that they went out and killed 3 or 4 women a week, because, generally speaking, if you do that at that high of a volume, chances are you're going to get caught sooner rather than later. I think when they didn't kill, I think they probably either one didn't come across a victim, or if they did come across a victim, the circumstances were one, they have already been seen, or there was eyewitnesses. And again, like these two girls, Karen Adams and Lori Neeson, were abducted in probably a very quick amount of time. It doesn't take very long to drag somebody into your van and cruise off if there's nobody in sight. And then if somebody turns the corner who's walking around the block, they wouldn't even know that girl was there. So I think in these particular cases, it is, I mean, they're clearly crimes of opportunity, but they're also seeking out these crimes. And then I think they're making a choice on whether or not, is this one going to get us caught? I mean, I really don't feel like going back to jail, but I mean, if the rate, I don't know, man, it's tough to get in the mind of a killer when you're not a killer, because
Well, it can be, but these individuals aren't particularly complex
No,
individuals.
no.
They're very, I mean, they're
Neanderthals.
very, yes, thank you. They have very little in the way of priority. They have no goals. That's what they are. They don't, again, they're unorganized offenders that traditionally, what the numbers tell us, they have no need to hide, no want nor need to hide their identity, because they don't know who their victim's going to be. It won't be known to them. And if you're out driving around and you're not throwing somebody in your van or vehicle until midnight or 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And they look where they are. These guys are not intelligent as in the definition of the word.
Mm-mm.
They're intelligent at getting away with what they want to do, because A, they've done it before and got away, and B, they've done it before and got caught. So through trial and error, they've learned some things to do and some things not to do. And what they are looking for is a female victim. They're not particularly particular about who their victim is. They're looking for the opportunity. What is the opportunity? A female victim that's solo, out by herself, that we happen to come across, and there's just so happens to be no cars around or nobody else to see us, to identify our vehicle or a plate number, or that it was, what our description, our physical description is. And then think about the way that they leave the body afterwards.
In a ditch.
Yes, they just pull up and throw the body in a ditch somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Because there's no reason for them to go to the lengths and to the measures of concealing the body, because there's no connection from the victim to them. And as sad as it may be, that's what these guys did. What is our proof that they've done it multiple times? These guys are serial killers working together. Our proof is, A, the one guy was already locked up for murder, and when he gets out in 1973, he's become buddies with the other guy, and then they go out murdering together. And as Bill said, within a 6-month time period, they managed to abduct and murder 2 different women. And then in 1977, they're convicted for 2 separate incidents in Northwest Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
where they did basically the same thing. They just were unsuccessful in the killing portion of it.
Yeah, in the
where
Toledo
they,
area.
yeah, Toledo area. They abduct, rape, and attempted murder on 2 different victims in 2 different separate attacks. So what they did there, likely, it looks to me, Bill, from what I could see, unfortunately, Karen Adams and Lori Neeson, it looks to me like they were probably strangled.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have that wrong, I know you'll correct me, but or at a later date.
They don't mention too much about like how they're how they, what the autopsies showed as far as, I know that their body, like she was found nude. So it's like, she was assaulted and then sexually assaulted. And that's just, to me, and discarded that way. And I hate to use that word because we're talking about a human being, but that's what it was to these guys. These guys
Right.
didn't think,
No.
even like last week I did a case on Julianne Hansen, and the guy in that case, he says at one point during his, like, when he's confessing, he's like, well, I put a jacket over her because I didn't want her to get cold. I mean, there are different types of murders, and I know that's weird for people to try to grasp, but like people who respect women and kill them, I mean, I don't think there's anybody that's like that. I mean, I just think that there's I don't know, killers have different motivations, but these guys in particular, their motivation was strictly to get what they wanted out of it, and that was
Right.
to, I hate to use this because it sounds so colonial, but rape and pillage, these
Yep.
women. And it's kind of almost like these guys were pre-programmed to do this kind of stuff. I mean, sure, they meet in prison. Meyer's already there for murder. Weber, is there probably for assault. It's so interesting that they had 4 years where they could have been doing this. And I think if I'm an investigator from that area, from anywhere in the state of Ohio, I am going to be looking at any case between 1973 and 1977 that involves any young female that is not solved. I mean, how can you not look at these guys for every single case because of their propensity? I mean, he even says it in his confession. We would go out and prowl. We would sexually assault. And I mean, like that sounds like he's boasting about it. So
yeah, according to the detective, I mean, that's one of the killer's own words.
Yes,
saying
exactly.
We would get together and we would go out and drive around looking for a victim. And then later you have the detective saying, hey, these guys were out drunk. They would get nice and lubricated and drunk and go out and drink and drive and look for a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, some nights they found them. And then with the Toledo cases, my guess is probably why I keep going back to strangulation is that seems to be the thing that killers get wrong most often from the cases I've reviewed, where they think that they've successfully killed someone, but they later come to, and they've even gone to the point where they've discarded or dumped the body.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, and then fortunately the victim wakes up at some point,
Yeah,
and is able to tell police what happened and who abducted them and what they did to them. And so these guys locked up from one of them for 10 years. I don't know when the other one went in, but
yeah,
they
it
get
doesn't
out.
say.
And here, think of the continued streak of bad luck for just the communities involved here. They get out roughly about the same time, 73. They're out for that 3 to 4 year time period before they're convicted of the attempted murders up in Northwest Ohio.
Yeah.
And then they spend a good amount of time in prison again. I think they're released, 2001?
Well, I think Weber died in 92.
So Weber dies in 92.
Or 94, 92 or 94. I don't know.
2001, Meyer gets out. But then in 2011, Meyer is then convicted of the Adams case.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until 2021 that they connect Meyer and Weber to the Nesson case, which they had already. Weber confessed to the Adams case at some point while he was already locked up. So all their crimes that they did after 73, they likely did all of them together. It sounds like to me. That doesn't mean that it's impossible that they did them separately. It's just probably was easier for them to do them together. It's scary,
power in numbers,
and it's scary to think about the number of victims that they possibly could have, because you're talking about a 4-year time span. You're talking about people that were probably doing this very frequently or wanting to do it frequently. And think about the distance between the far east side of Columbus and Toledo. That's not close proximity for people that are listening in other states. What's the drive time on
we're
that?
talking
An hour and a half, 2 hours?
We're talking 2 hours, and we're talking about you can go 70 to 75 and you go up 75 and you're going to go through Findlay, you're going to go through Bowling Green. I mean, I would look at cases around the Bowling Green area. I mean, think about all the co-eds around there. Then you have Toledo. I mean, we're not talking about, I mean, Ohio people, a lot of people like to think of Ohio as just straight up farmland. And yeah, we have a lot of farmland, but we also have a lot of big cities, or a lot of bigger cities than most people think of. I mean, if you think about Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton,
Cleveland,
Toledo, Youngstown, Akron. I mean,
Akron's huge.
That's what I'm saying. Like we're talking about a few 100,000 people in all of these cities. Columbus is obviously, I think, the most populated, because
Columbus is what, like the 13th largest city?
It's because you have such damn large. Your city's so much larger than Cleveland. It's hilarious. Right. Like our proper is so much smaller than Columbus proper.
Columbus is sprawling.
Oh, it's crazy. Columbus, not to go on a tangent, but I mean, Columbus is like the mecca of the fast food world, man. I mean, it's like if a company wants to test something out, they go to Columbus. It's crazy.
Well, Wendy's was founded.
Well, Dave Thomas, absolutely.
Greater Columbus area.
Absolutely. I've been to the original.
God bless Wendy's.
I mean, isn't the original downtown on?
That was the second one.
Okay.
Well, you know what? That might be the first one. It was actually originated from Dublin.
Oh, okay.
Ohio. But gets called Columbus. So I don't know if that means that the first one was in Dublin or if Dave Thomas was just from Dublin.
Yeah, not to go on a fast food tangent.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother story.
Welcome to Fast Food Nation with Bill Huffman and Nick from True Crime Garage.
Did you check
from
out
Burger Garage?
Did you check out the latest chicken sandwich from wherever? Yeah, no. Anyway, back to the story.
I did a quick so Eastmore High School.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the victims here was, we have witnesses that hung out with her that night, and we know that unfortunately, these guys found her while they were out trolling in the middle of the night, and she had gone to a football game. It doesn't get any more Ohio than that. High school, you go to every high school home football game, and if you're lucky enough, you're popular enough to get invited to a party or two afterwards. I didn't fall into that category.
Or go to Friendlies or Subway or wherever this the local
Bill
fast
was
food.
Popular enough to go to the Friendlies. I was popular enough to just go home. But our victim here, unfortunately, was popular enough to be invited to a couple of parties that they attended, at least one of them afterwards. So these guys were picking them up in the middle of the night. These football games don't end until 10:30 at night.
I mean, it's dark and it's the 70s. It's not like we're talking about people were very cognizant about personal security. It's not like there were cameras, CCTV, lights everywhere like there are nowadays. I mean, it was probably a heck of a lot easier to abduct somebody at 10:30 than it is now at 10:30. I mean, just in that area alone, I guarantee you it's a brighter, more cameras and ATMs, cameras and freaking banks, cameras and everywhere.
Oh yeah, and especially once you get back to like Whitehall today is very inner city. I don't think it would have been that way in 1970. And Reynoldsburg would have been very much a ghost town after 11 p.m.
Yeah, Reynoldsburg, isn't Reynoldsburg kind of I don't want to say the boonies, but isn't it kind of? No,
not quite.
Okay.
Because you have a lot of suburbs today that Reynoldsburg might have been a little boonies in the early 70s.
Okay.
So Columbus,
it just seems like a good place to ditch a body if you needed to ditch a body It,
Well, that's what they're doing. They're picking her up from a location and then they're driving away from the city to dump the body when they're done doing whatever they're doing. Today, Columbus is the 14th most populous city in the United States. I feel like we're skyrocketing.
yeah, no,
I
you
feel like
guys.
just years ago it was like 16th.
Well, you do actually increase your population every year, where Cleveland loses population every year. It's a weird thing, but I think it also has to do with Ohio State and the fact that you have a much bigger area to kind of build out. I mean, Cleveland, we are kind of locked in by the lake, so uh, it is
One of
what
these days, that university is going to own this town.
it does.
They
What are you
already
going
do.
to say?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
It's just more fun to say it that way, Bill. But not to freak anybody out here, but when we talk about what these guys could have been up to, and we talk about the cold cases that are out there, according to the Ohio Attorney General's office, the cold case homicide database that they have, there are over 2,200 cold case homicides in the state of Ohio. And I am here to tell you, Bill, and everybody else out there in listener land, that number, they're missing people from that list. There are unsolved homicides in this state that I know that have not made their way to that database yet, because the way that database works is it is on the investigating agencies' backs for them to supply the information to basically submit their case to the database. And if they don't bother to do so, it doesn't end up on the database. So what we do know is over 2,200 confirmed unsolved homicides in the state of Ohio. And a quick Google Maps, Toledo, Ohio to Eastmore Academy High School in Columbus is a 2-hour and 29-minute drive.
Yeah.
That's a lot of land. There's a lot of ditches between those two spots.
And I'm not kidding when I mean, you talk about, I know these guys were convicted of, Karen Adams was 17. So that's the reason why I think of okay, 18-year-olds would still fall in line. 19-year-olds, college girls. I mean, you have the University of Findlay, you have again, University of Toledo, Bowling Green, all these different colleges and universities along that path. There's got to be some connections to some of those unsolved cases in those parts of the state that are related to Meyer and Weber. I mean, it seems almost impossible that they didn't do more than just these two killings. I refuse to believe that. And like you said, you bet you're going to bet your van and your farm. I'll bet I bet my house that they're at the very least, there are assaults that they were never convicted of. And I would almost guarantee
there must
murders.
Right. And there must be, all right. Well, never mind. I'm strike that from the record. I don't want to go down that road.
Well,
but I'm not changing gears here. But what I'm trying to point out to the listeners, and we're lucky enough that we both have a lot of listeners and a lot of good people in the state of Ohio listening. Think about the way this went down. Karen Adams' homicide in the early 70s was not solved until 2011. Okay. And then we have Lori Neeson's case is not solved until 2021. And her case is solved simply because somebody notified the Reynoldsburg Police Department that says, hey, that sounds a lot similar to how the Karen Adams was killed. So what I want to throw out there to everybody is these guys were on the loose and actively working and abducting and killing together from 73 to maybe late 76 or sometime in 77. I don't have the exact conviction date when they were convicted in 77. And I'm guessing it might've been in two separate trials, but this is a heed the call moment to all the listeners out there in the great state of Ohio, especially those that have awareness from Columbus, Ohio up to Toledo.
Absolutely.
That's again, 2.5 hour drive time between those 2 points. If you are aware of a cold case, of, especially if it's a woman found by herself in a ditch or alongside the road or a cornfield that was murdered in cold case from that time period in that window of 3 to 4 years. A simple call of, hey, this sounds a lot similar to what these guys were doing. And it's a situation where, like Bill said, they may not have been able to pull DNA off of certain victims for any number of reasons. It was the 70s, it was early 70s. They might not have known to be looking for it. In these two cases, in Adams and Neeson, they may not have been actively storing the DNA. They may have actively stored the victim's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that in one case, that's how they recovered the DNA of the perpetrators. So these are guys that I think could still be connected to. You and I are both in 100% agreement that they've done and committed other crimes. These could be other homicides, and if they were, they're unsolved. And these are guys that could be connected to some other cases. And I'm intrigued by this because I am hoping that a lot of red flags went up for these different sheriff's departments and police departments across this great state to look at these guys and consider these guys, and let's close another case. Let's get another case off of the desk and close it. And I don't want to use the word closure because the more I do this, the less I believe in it. And but let's provide answers to those who didn't have answers of what happened to their loved ones so many years ago.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And I think that you did a good job of calling, a call for action, a CFA, whatever you want to call it, acronym wise. It's definitely something that people should be cognizant of. I mean, again, this case was solved by the tip of a relative, but still it was a tip. I mean, it really is amazing if people pay attention to the cases that they have in their neighborhoods that are unsolved in the 70s, and you think there may be a connection. I mean, hit up Crime Stoppers, hit up your local police. I mean, it's not like some of these towns, you could be in a small town and there might be one unsolved murder along the way, because how many small towns are between here and Toledo, like we were saying.
Exactly.
I mean, I mentioned the bigger cities and the colleges, but again, like you said, there are so many ditches and so many different places to discard a body. And that's, I hate to say it like that because it sounds like it's taken away from who the victim was and that they were a person, but it's true. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get rid of the evidence and basically protect their ass and not get caught. And basically that's what these guys, I mean, this whole story, Charles Weber and Robert Meyer, these two individuals are a stain on the state of Ohio. And to think that there were other killers, I mean, I know there were two killers in Toledo in the 70s that were also doing similar things. It's crazy, man. Like, to think that these people are out there and they just live amongst us. And it's important for people to provide not that closure, but provide evidence of, provide evidence for the particular cases. I mean, it's one of those things that if there aren't enough people to share the information with the officers, then they're not going to get closure on the cases. And basically all I'm saying is pay attention, do your due diligence. If there's an unsolved case, contact your local authorities, because you never know who might be involved. And these guys, their DNA is in the records, so they can at least do a preliminary DNA check if there's DNA in the case.
That's exactly right, Bill. And I 100% agree with everything that you said there. And while we're talking about cold cases, if you don't mind, if I could throw in a little plug here before we wrap up today. The Ohio History Connection is a place that's near and dear to my heart. They're locally here in Columbus, and we've done, when I say we, I mean the captain and I from True Crime Garage have done 2 events for them in the past. We did a discussion about a now solved cold case from Columbus, Ohio, and we also did a discussion on the Sam Shepard case that, of course, Bill would be very familiar with from because it was a Bay Village case
Yep.
up near him. But on Thursday, August 26th of this year, I will be doing, not True Crime Garage, but I will be doing a virtual event for the Ohio History Connection. And that will be a cold case in Ohio, cold case conversation with myself and James Renner. And the proceeds, some of the proceeds of that will be going to obviously the Ohio History Connection, and some of that will be going to Porchlight as well. So if there's anybody that wants to join in or listen in on our Ohio cold case conversation, check that out. You can find more information very easily. Just go to ohiohistory.org.
Very cool. You got any other pluggables that you'd like to get out there? Where can everybody
Yeah, listen
find
to
your stuff?
Listen to True Crime Garage. It's the second best show next to Who Killed.
Whatever.
If you like Who Killed, then you're going to almost like True Crime Garage.
Oh, well, that is quite the compliment, but I know you're just patting me on the back. But no, I do believe True Crime Garage is the best podcast out there, and I am very lucky to have you as a mentor along the way, and
A friend,
and
not a mentor.
well,
We're
you
friends,
started
but-
off as a mentor and have become a friend, and it is it's very fun to discuss these cases with you because I think your insights are very, very informative, and the listeners, I know for a fact, love listening to you on the show. And I implore everybody, if they haven't, to check out all your stuff on the Stitcher app and your back catalog and all the great episodes that you and the captain do. So
Well, and another thing we should probably mention as well, and offer our support to the family members of those who have missing individuals from
absolutely.
their lives, people that they are searching for. There is an Ohio missing persons event that will be in Cleveland. I don't have the information in front of me as far as the location, but that will be September 18th. It's pretty easy to find the information if you just look up Ohio missing event. I think you'll be able to find what you're looking for. That is being put on, from my understanding, from the Cleveland Police Department and the Attorney General's office. So I'm hoping to be able to make it up there for that event, to walk around and chat with some of these their victims. I mean, they're people that are looking for their missing loved ones.
Yeah.
And Bill, I'm hoping if I'm able to make it, I'm hoping to bump into you there as well.
Yeah, I plan on hooking up with you, and if James is around, we'll make our rounds. And again, it's not a convention; it's a place where victims congregate and kind of commiserate together. And it's kind of one of the things that I try to focus on with the show, and it's provide. I do it. I say it in the opening, and it's providing a voice for the voiceless, and that's basically my whole goal, because a lot of these women are just forgotten. And if the family members aren't around to cheer them on or cheer on the law enforcement to solve the cases, then a lot of these cases just don't get solved. So I think it's important to participate in those events, and I think that's all very good information, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, and providing a voice for the voiceless, thank you for doing that. And thank you for picking the case that you did this week, because that's what we're seeing here on several occasions, where a voice came out from the crowd, out from nowhere, and said, hey, take a look at this case. Hey, take a look at this piece of evidence. Take a look at this case because it mirrors this one. And so where these cases are incredibly tragic and sad and heartbreaking, at least there was a voice for Karen Adams, and there was a voice for Lori Neeson. And now we have some answers, and we have a better understanding of how terrible these two individuals were. And we also need to look at what else they could be responsible for.
I agree. And I'm glad they're both dead.
Yes,
Not the women, the
of
perpetrators.
course. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because these and we are also lucky that they spent the majority of their
oh,
adulthood locked up, because it just these two situations amongst, actually, well, we talked about at least 5
mhm.
horrific crimes that they were involved in. It shows who they were
That's-
and what they are.
Yeah. If they would have been able to run amok for years and years and decades, we would be talking about some of the most prolific serial killers in the history of true crime.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nick, I know you got a roll, and man, it's always awesome to talk to you, and I know the listeners love it. So, thank you so much for your insights, and again, your time. I know it's precious, so I appreciate you having you on.
Thank you, Bill. It's always fun to chat with you.
Thank you so much again to Nick from the True Crime Garage podcast for taking time out of his crazy schedule to join me this week to discuss a variety of cold cases, as well as the crazy guys, Robert Meyer and Charles Weber. As you guys know, I do drop new episodes of Who Killed every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Basically, wherever you're listening to this show right now, you can find all of my episodes. As always, if you enjoy the podcast and my other shows, you can help support the show by clicking on the link in the show notes, or you can contribute to the show via Venmo. And you can do so by using my username at Bill-Huffman-3. It's not a lie when I say all contributions, big or small, help keep these podcasts going. You can also help support the show by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or again, wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Those 5 stars do help keep the important cases that I cover, such as Amy's and all the other unsolved cases, in the spotlight. And if you'd like to stay up to date on the cases that I have covered, as well as the new shows I have coming down the pipeline, please don't hesitate to follow me on Twitter at BillHuffman3. Thank you again so much for listening. Thanks so much again to Nick from the Great True Crime Garage podcast. You can find all their stuff at Stitcher. And if you have not listened to their show, I highly recommend it. And until next time, be healthy and stay safe.